Hello, my name is Yanis. I work as a web developer in Accenture, even though web developer is a little bit interesting role that I have because it's not just a web developer. We also do architecture. We do a lot of different things just to make sure that the website is up and running. And just recently, we actually launched one new website for 400,000 users for a client in the US. So I have some experience. But today, we're going to work with JavaScript. And to be honest, even though we are building websites with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, we don't use them as you're going to see them today, but this is the first kind of building block, the first steps to get to how we use these technologies in a much more advanced way. So what we are going to do today? Well, we're going to start with what is JavaScript as a whole. Wait a sec. What is JavaScript as a whole, and why is it so popular? What are the alternatives if we need any? Then we're going to go on to how we can set up our code in JavaScript in general, or in HTML actually, and then we're going to use JavaScript there. The next part will be some basics about comments, variables, and what are events in JavaScript in general. We will take a look at functions, even though we can actually see functions from the start, just how the language works. And then lastly, we're gonna do some actual fun, where we're gonna code a little simple piece of code, and that will look actually, let me quickly show you. If we go here, this is what I wrote today. So this is the end goal. One block that keeps falling. If you click on it, then it gets reset. This is what we were trying to achieve today. And then, well, the last part is Q&A if you want to ask any questions. So without further ado, being a lazy person, I didn't write my own statement what is JavaScript and how it is being used, but there are two links here from Wikipedia and MDN. Both of them say more or less the same thing, that this is a scripting programming language, it's object-oriented, there are like first-class functions. Overall, a lot of kind of heavy techno-babble that no one really understands what it is. But in terms of, for us, what does it mean? It's basically a simple way how to add some extra functionality into our HTML code, and it allows us to do a lot, actually a lot more than you would imagine. Some of the basic things that we're going to use today in much more advanced ways are building the most popular websites that you would use usually like daily. For example, Facebook does this, or I don't know, Twitch TV, if someone watches that they also use a lot of JavaScript in their code. Like basically the whole site is just JavaScript that generates HTML. And only a rare website actually uses plain HTML as a whole. And then we have, of course, any new programming language that you want to start learning, you have to have a hello world. So this is in JavaScript, how to write a function which says hello world, and that's it. Moving on. So why do we want to write comments in general in code? Well, I remember myself in university when I told my teacher, hey, but I know what I wrote here and I will remember what I wrote there. And I don't need any comments next to that line because it's not important, because like I can understand what is written there. And then after 2 weeks, I was looking at my code and I couldn't understand a single word. Like, what is happening in that overall algorithm? What did I write here? And this is why basically it's a good, if you have to explain what that code does to someone who just saw this code first time, then it's good to write comments. And in general, we have two different comment types. So there are the multi-line ones and there are the single line ones. Depends which one you want to use when. Usually multi-line ones, for example, when you use specific type of documentation, then you would use multi-line ones. If you want to just write what is the next line doing or something like that, or just leave a note, then that's your like single line comments overall. I will run through these basic concepts quite quickly, and then we're gonna go into coding part, and then I will explain all of this much more and in much more detail. So don't worry if I'm like running forward. This is just some basic concepts so that you would at least have some understanding what I'm doing when I'm gonna start actually coding. Okay, moving on. Variables. So in JavaScript, there are 3 types of variables. One is var or variable, one is let, and one is const. So in general, I would suggest never use var. That is a historical, and once upon a time, there were no lets, there were no consts. So you could use only vars, and that's it. The problem with var is that it is a global variable. So if you create it anywhere in code, it will be available all across the whole your code. Like it's everywhere, it exists everywhere, which can lead to a really tricky situations where you wrote some code and you don't understand why it doesn't work anymore, but actually basically created the same variable twice, and then one is overwriting the other one, and you will be in a lot of mess. So for that reason, we have 2 different ones. And this is after a while when people got to code the code overall in JavaScript, they understood, hey, this is a problem, we should fix it. And they created 2 different variable names. One is let, the other one is const. Both of them are scope specific. And basically one of them is kind of, you can set a value to it and then you can change that variable, which is also not super advisable. I would suggest to work mostly with consts. So basically, if you declare a variable, it should remain with that value, and mostly you should basically recreate new variables. This is kind of coming from practice. Overall, for your purposes, you can stick with vars and that's it. But then over time, you're gonna find out that it actually creates some problems. And of course, we have a little bit of a example code here. So it's still the same hello world function, but here I created one const variable, which it's a str is the variable name, and it has a value of hello world. And then I console log, so I output this to a console again, so that basically we can see hello world. So just one step a little bit further away. Events. So here I don't have an example because we're gonna do a little bit more with practice, but overall, there are multiple different events. And events are when you as a user do something with a browser or a particular element in the browser. At that point, it would fire a specific JavaScript code that you wrote. So for example, when a input changes, so when we start to write text in an input field, or when you click on a specific button, or when the mouse is hovering above a button, or when you go out of that hover. Also, when you type, every time when you press a button, when you release a button, there is a event that fires off. And then your browser kind of processes all those events and fires the required JavaScript code. And of course, there's onload. So basically, whenever something loads, at that point, you can also fire JavaScript code. The last one is quite useful, for example, when you have images or specific items that when they load, you want to do something else extra. For example, when you load user's information, then after that, you want to also load his picture from a different place or something like that. So it's a nifty tool to make your website load faster, because then you don't need to wait for everything to load and only then show it to the user, but you can do it kind of faster overall, and he slowly sees how the whole page loads. Functions. So this is the last kind of technical part, I think, and then we're gonna get off to coding. So functions usually are used at the time when you don't want to repeat the same code multiple times. And why we don't want to do that is basically because imagine if you have the same code, which does the same functionality, like, well, in this case, I have a sum, right? But anything a bit more complex, like getting a square root or something. And then you would have to write it all across a big website, which has a lot of places where it would use this specific function. Now, if you would have to change one part about it or do some console logging or understand, like find some issue, you will have to basically go and change every place where this was done. And most likely you will forget some place, and then you will have some bugs in your code. So code won't work as intended to do. And that's why it's a lot better to actually have functions where you can do this in one place and then call this function all over the place in different kind of wherever you require it. So when something goes wrong, you can fix it in one place rather than in 100 or like 100,000, depends. And overall, what do we do here is we declare the function, which is called sum. It has two variables as inputs, a and b, and it has a return value. So this function, whenever we call it, it will try to combine a and b value and then return it as a result. Now, this is our hello world function. It still outputs the string here. And then there is the sum function call here. So this is basically this sum is being called. A is 25, B is 42, and then the result should be what, 67, if I'm not mistaken. So we can actually test this code. Well, I'll do it later, but I'll show you how this works, and later on you can also just copy paste this and check it out. Okay, so that's kind of it for introduction. Now I'll start coding. And so this is what I wrote today as a practice so that I'm not completely failing. We're gonna start from scratch. So we're here and we wanna get here. So this is my little cheat sheet, but overall I'm gonna do everything from 0 and see how far I can get. So first thing I wanna do is actually to have a div. I assume you already learned what divs are, so this is just a block that we will have, and I will add to it a class, so this will be, parent. And this parent will have a style, and this style will be something like background color black. And then what else do I want it to have? Oh, and then width, VH, and height. So instead of setting 100%, I'm using VH and WH, view height, view width, and view width. So this is, and now this is where you want to start writing comments. And I think, I don't remember how to write comments in JavaScript, so I'll do what a normal, typical person would do. I would go CSS, and then comment. How do you write comments in CSS? Same thing. So basically, I want to say use, I don't think it will allow me to do this in here, unfortunately. I think I need to put it out into a separate file, then it will allow it to do the comments. But nevertheless, the width here, and these are wrong, by the way. The width is the view width of my whole screen. So when I'm gonna open this page, and I need to find this page. So copy path, then go to browser, close all of these, and of course, do this. So this is my page. I don't see anything here. Let's check if there's anything here. Nothing here as well. So probably I didn't save it. Yep, exactly. So when we save and go back here, here's my full block. So it's 100% width and it's 100% height. So this allows me to quickly create a block that is always this kind of position, which will be helpful later on. Now, we have our parent. the next part, we want to create something that will react when we click on it. So let's do actual JavaScript finally and have a on click, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, we call a function. So we have to create that function. In this case, I'm just going to create a script. So this is the inline type of JavaScript. I can just create something here. I can say function and then on click, or let's do click me so we don't get confused. And then it will be just a function which will say the same thing we did before in the examples. So hello world. And here I just want to call you. So what I did here is basically I created a function which is called click me. Now I want to call this function here. So whenever I click on this parent, which is the black box, then it should write hello world. Now let's do this and let's put you to the side. So when I go to the console, so this is where all of these will be printed out. If I click here, nothing happens. If I refresh, still nothing happens. So probably I didn't do something correct. Let's check what's the, oh, of course, I didn't save again. There we go. So whenever I click on the black box, it says hello world. And then because this debugger is smart enough, it just combines the same text. If I click on the white bits here on the sides, then it doesn't increase. But if I do it here, so you can see hello world is working. So this is simple. Like we're clicking on a big black screen, it calls this click me function, and this is kind of it. So this is it's called when a parent now, well, if we remember our goal, so this is this black box, there is a white box that keeps falling. So what we want to do is add the white box. Now I'll do this and I'll call you, I will add an ID to this item. So the difference between IDs and classes are more used for, well, styles, and IDs are unique identifiers. So this should be unique in the whole site. And this case will be, I'll just call it falling. So it's always, like this will be the box that will be always falling. Now I still can assign a class to it. So whenever I have an item with ID falling, then I want its background color to be white. And I also want so that its width is 30 pixels and height is also 30 pixels. So this is because just I want to more or less, I want to see it. And I think currently it's here. So if you go to the elements, we have this object. And if you mouse over here, you can see the blue box down in the corner. So that's the place where that actual div is. So we want to have it actually globally positioned. And for that, there is a CSS style, which is relative position. And I want to have a position which is, I think, relative. I'm going to cheat. Absolute. So one quick note, I don't know if you talked about this last time, but if you want to find quick explanation on what all these styles do, then you can go basically CSS and then position, absolute. So I use Google daily to find quickly some things that I don't quite remember. And I wouldn't say that it's required for people to actually know all of this from the top of their heads. Quickly finding an example and understanding how to, like, you are job is to understand how to use this information rather than knowing this information from the top of your head. And that's the difference. Like if you're gonna just remember everything from your head, but you won't understand what you remember, then that information is useless. So it's quite important to know how to find what you need so that you can do things. And in this case here, we have like position and explains the different types of positions. In this case, it's absolute, which basically means that it should be always positioned against the global window. So whenever I refresh this page, and if I would save the file, then my block should be actually positioned absolutely, but I need to also tell it where does it have to go, and I'll tell it just go at the top of the page, please. So now it's here in the corner. So if I mouse over this, that's our object, and if I mouse over this, this is our like big black box. Okay, so what's next? Well, we want to move our on click. So if in the end result, when I click on the white box, it does something there, not when I click here. So let's move our click to the correct item. And let's change this text to something more interesting. I clicked on the white box. Refresh, click here, and check the console. And it says that. So now it's working on this and doesn't work on the black box. So far, so good, right? And seems quite easy. Now the hard part comes where we actually need to make this item, the box, to move. So there are a few ways how to do this. I will do it first on the click me function. So what we will do is we want to get, we have a object called this. And in this case, and here element. So remember when I showed you arguments in functions? So in this case, this element, or this is an element, which is this div or HTML DOM object. You can also actually print this out. So whenever you don't understand what's happening, just start adding console logs and print out everything so you can understand what's happening. So what I did is basically added this. So this will be this whole object. And I get it here as element because this is a variable. And then I just print out that variable. Now I can refresh and click here. So it prints out the whole object here, as you can see. If I now reuse the same function and I do copy paste from here to the big black box, it's the same function, same code. But if I'm going to refresh and click on the big black box, it actually prints the other object, as you can see. So this is that one, this is that there. And that's why functions are quite nice, actually. So you can write the same code, use it, reuse it, and then allows you to kind of do things faster and reuse a lot of what you did. Okay. So now when let's remove this because we don't need it. Now I will show you the next step, which is what we want to do. We want to move element by 10 pixels lower. This is our goal. So whenever we're going to click the item, it's going to move downwards. How to do this? Well, thankfully, HTML DOM has some, and JavaScript together have some code that is written for us so we can do this. In this case, I will do element.style.top. So what this will do is basically get this element style. So remember we did the styles here. So this element has a style, which is basically this. And we're going to change this item's value. And we're going to set it to, well, let's do 30 pixels. So at the start, it was at 0. We're going to change it to 30. Let's refresh the page and click on the object. Now, as you can see, it drops. If I click again, it doesn't move. And why? Because, well, it always sets to 30. Regardless of wherever it was, it will go to 30. Then our next step would be actually to move it gradually, increasing the amount of this value. So we need to take this value, element style top, and add to this 30 pixels. The problem is I don't know actually how this is written in there. So what I'm going to do is I'll just do this. I want to see what's written in this top. So let's do refresh and check. When I click, there's nothing there. When I click again, there's 30 pixels. Now, why would that happen? We have the 30 pixels here, right? Or, well, 0 at the start. And now there is, the 30 appears only after the click. So this is because the style actually is a inline style that you can add to the element. So if I would do this and then tell this item that its top position is 0 pixels, and then refresh, then I'm going to say 0 pixels, and then when I click again, it will say 30. So that's kind of good, but then we need still to increase this. And again, a lot of coding is working with strings, so different types of text. And because it's really common, what we want to do then is reuse a lot of existing functionality. For example, in JavaScript, all of the strings have a specific set of functions. Now, if I'm actually going to show you how that looks, MDN string JavaScript. MDN in general is a really good resource to kind of find information about JavaScript, where it explains all the things that are possible. So all strings in JavaScript have all of these functions that are listed here. And the thumbs down means that basically this should not be used. Some of them are removed, and some of them are with warning signs so that you would be. And then they also have some properties. So there's a lot of information, right? For us, what we want to do, we just want to basically do like this 30 pixels plus whatever it was before, and then do a sum. How do you do this? Well, we probably want to get this 30 out. Now, how to get the 30 out of without the pixels? Well, we want to replace the pixel here, so we get just the number. Now, there should be a function called replace. And here we can actually open this function and read what it does. So basically it says that whenever you're gonna use it, it will use the pattern as the first argument and then replace that pattern with the second argument. So in our case, we want to take this style top, and thankfully our VS Code is quite smart and it actually knows how HTML works, so it already is highlighting. So here's the search value. So what we're searching for is px. And what we want to replace it with is, well, nothing, because we just want to remove it. We don't want to replace it with something else. So we would do this, and then let's see what is the result. We click here. So now we have just a 0. Now, the other part, okay, well, we have the 0. So what I will do is, because I don't want to repeat myself, and that's one of the good practices as a programmer, you don't repeat yourself. That's actually like this. It's one of the core concepts that almost every developer should know. I want to save this value. So I'll say const current position. And then I'm going to do this. And this will allow me to know where my current position is. Refresh, click, it's still there. Okay, fine. Well, I have my current position. Now I want to have this plus, well, Okay, so the next part that I didn't tell you about yet is about how strings are being constructed. Now, I could show you the old way, so that's basically take what our current position plus 30 plus px. Now, this will probably result in a really weird situation where I think it dropped somewhere. Yeah, so you can see it set it to 3030. Now, the problem is that JavaScript is smart and stupid at the same time, and it thinks this is a string and this is a string, so it basically tries to combine them and create something weird. So to teach it that this is actually a number, we have to say parse int. So this is also a function that allows you, or well, if we would not know that that one exists, is basically we want to convert string to integer and then JavaScript. And the first function that appears here is parse int. So this is what we're going to use. And basically, we'll try to understand what number is written in this value. Okay, let's try that. Go here, refresh, click, and click again. And I think it is working. Cool. Now the next bit is to actually make it do it on its own. And that is a little bit more tricky. So what we're going to do for that is, instead of clicking ourselves constantly the same thing, we're actually going to do a loop. So loops are repeated functions until it basically we say it's to stop. So I will use a do while loop. And this is, well, let's say, well, true. So basically I'm saying do while it's, well, do forever. So forever call this click me. And we're gonna put it here. And we're gonna do how we would do this. Do I need to wrap up, by the way, or not? How much time do I have? Let's do this. So now when I'm gonna click, this basically breaks my code. Now, I think my computer actually started to, yeah. So what happened here is once I clicked first time, it started to repeatedly create new and new objects and go recursively. Like it was calling this function so many times that my computer started to really like chunk and think about how to do this. Just because this was really bad code. And well, bad code is not necessarily bad. It's just we learned that we should not do that. And instead, what we want to do is, well, call it only when a specific condition is met. And for that, actually, I will do a new function, which I'll call loop. And this function will get this element. And then it will basically do while, and then counter is less than 10. Counter plus 1. And I'm going to create, which will be 0. So this should not allow me to go into crazy forever loops. And it should call this click me function with the same element over and over again. Now we have to still call this function. And what we can do is actually just do this. And now it says that a style is not defined on click me, and this is because we're trying to call this function, but in at the time when actually this part doesn't even exist. So when your browser tries to parse all of this, it goes from top to bottom, and it tries to do this even though this part of code doesn't exist. So what we actually want to do is here do onload, and then call this loop and provide this element. And it did not call itself. So while counter, well, let's check if it actually worked. It does not work. Now, well, if it doesn't work, unload JavaScript example. Well, it says to do this. Okay. Unload. Let's do it here. Top of undefined. So you're still trying to do basically too early. Okay, fine. I guess then what we will do is just do this. This should work, right? Okay, but that was way too fast. Like we clicked and it just did it in, well, basically no time, right? We wanted to move slowly. So how do we do that? Well, again, we can search JavaScript set timeout. Okay, so there is this method, which looks a little bit complicated from the get-go. And then there's the other one, which I'll just tell you about, which is sleep. So basically we tell the whole JavaScript to just relax and go and like sleep for some time. And this is actually in milliseconds. So 100 milliseconds should be 1/10 of a function. So we should see some sort of a slow process. Sleep is not defined. Okay. No. Did I think I wrote it. I see. They removed sleep actually. So no longer it is being supported, which is strange. So that means that we still have to use set timeout. Okay, well, fine. So set timeout is a sort of a delayed function execution. So as the first argument, we can actually give not a value, not a string, not a number, but we actually are providing a function. And in this case, our function will be click me. And we want to do that function, well, let's say after 100 milliseconds. Now, what this means basically when we're going to click, after 100 milliseconds, this should be shown and then the item should move. So let's go to our code and try that out. So I click, and then it shows an error after a while, which says it's still of undefined. And that's because this click me doesn't get a value, so this is undefined, which means that function I need to actually call the function, and then I will provide the input value here, like this. And now refresh and click. Okay, so that happened. The problem though is that it kind of still didn't get where we wanted to go. It just did it once. So let's do this in a bit more interesting way. I will create a max clicks, and I will set it to 10. And then what I will do is, so this value will tell me how many clicks do I want to do. After that, what we want to do is here call the same loop with the same element, but we want to provide a value, and this value will be a click. Now this click will be also passed in from here, and we're gonna do it from here as well, and we're gonna get it from here, and we're gonna set it here to 0. So the idea is when we click on this loop here first time, it will go here and have the value here as 0. Now when our timeout will reach, when it will fire, when it will be called, we're gonna set click to be click plus 1. Now this click plus 1 will go into this click me and call this part of the code, and then this one will go into here. So that would mean this function for the second time would be called here, but with a different value. Just to see all of that, we're going to add click over here so we can understand what's happening. And then, well, remember when we had the while thing with endless calls? So we need to stop it at some point, and we will do that with this. If click is less than max click, then we want to do actually this bit. And this is an if statement, so basically it checks if this is true or false, and if it is true, then it will execute, and if it's false, then it won't do anything, and then just basically skip this piece of code, and that's it. Well, refresh, click, and there we go. It went somewhere. I think we need to reduce the amount of steps. So let's go to a 10, and let's do more steps. And click on it, and well, keeps moving downwards. So one part of it is achieved. However, okay, I think it stopped here. Well, there's only one kind of piece left, which is we need to, when we click on that white item, we need to actually destroy it. So how do we do that? Well, we have this loop here. Well, let's do this. Let is moving equals false. So I'll create a value which will be called is moving, and then it basically will move on its own. And once I will start here, is moving equals click equals 0. So this is also an expression. So think of this as actually like this. If click equals 0, then please set is moving to true. Now, otherwise, what I actually want to do is element dot okay, I don't remember this, so let's go and search again. JavaScript dot HTML remove element, and we need to do this. And here we have append child. Is there a remove? Okay, so we can say get this element and then just dot remove. So element dot remove and save. Okay. Well, let's check if it works. Refresh, click. Oh no. I see. So when we are calling it from here, So this is a bug that I created. This click me is calling also the same loop function, and the value of click here is different. So as a result, what it does is basically removes the element immediately. What we want to do is when the user clicks. So let's set here true. We will add a new value. And we actually then don't need this is moving value. And we don't need, yes. So is moving is gone. But we need here a user click. And here we're going to say it was not a user click. And here we're going to say it was a user click. As a result, we can check this user click if it is true. Or rather, yeah, like this. And when click is 0, or, well, actually, no, it is not 0, then we want to remove it. Now, when we click, it keeps moving. When we click on it again, it starts to move faster. Okay, that's not what I wanted. And it keeps going. Okay, so I made a mistake. And click. So if it is a user click, now I've broken the code, so I don't know even how to fix it. So when the user clicks, oh, of course, because the value here is 0. Okay, we don't care about this value at all. But then we're going to remove oh, right. This is what we want. So we wanted to do this, and then but this return value will prematurely, like, it won't execute this piece of code. I will just go out of the function here, and as a result, it will basically kick me out, and that's it. Click and click once again. No, it still doesn't do what I wanted to do. Okay, well, because I don't understand what's happening, let's do this. User click and then click. So there was a user click. I think these set timeouts are still there, which results in kind of continuous creation. So what we want to check is actually, does this element still exist to continue doing this? Let's do just this. Element remove. And then so we created this object with an ID falling. And what we're going to do is just check if it still kind of exists by doing this document get element by ID. So this is a function which allows us to search elements based on their ID names. And if exists, then let's do, oops, this. And like this. Refresh, click here. Nope. Well, I could completely switch to what I did before and explain what I did, because here I as it ends with code, you tend to do things a little bit differently every time when you code something. Here, I've achieved a somewhat close to what we wanted, but I think our time is running out. And this is the end result. I will share both of the types, so we will get both of them. And you can basically either fix this one or enhance and do something much more cooler with this. So the difference here, well, one, I didn't write any comments because I was too, I guess, lazy. What I do here is basically I added some extra stuff to recreate the element. So here's a function which creates the new object once I clicked on it. Then there's the same loop function, and then there's the same click function, and there's the initialize. So this initialize just calls the loop. So this is always kind of circling around. And instead of using pixels, I actually use height. And once, this is kind of end game kind of thing. If it reaches a specific height, at that point, it stops and doesn't work anymore. So if you would go to this piece of code, so now I can kind of click on it and it still keeps falling, but if it will fall to the ground, so basically like game over, in that case, it will stop working. So technically, well, yeah, it disappears. There's no more element. That's it. It's gone. This could be basically these objects could be falling from all over the place. You could be just clicking on them. You could have a high score, and as a result, you would have like I don't know, a shooter-ish little game that you could mini game that you could create. Or if you know the dinosaur game, when you don't have the internet, well, that one is also basically can be created with just these amounts. Like change this image to a dinosaur and add specific obstacles. And once it reaches specific height, then it kind of fails. Well, I think I'll wrap up. If you have any questions, this would be the time to ask. I know you were silent. I know it's a lot to take in. I think when you're going to do it on your own, and maybe rewatching this would be a little bit easier. Plus, I would suggest just start playing with the code and trying to do some little things using this. And of course, use the resources that I've mentioned. So you saw this tutorial here. So w3schools.com. Then there is MDN. So this is another great resource. This is like the Bible of JavaScript, basically. This is where everything and how it should work is described. And then don't be afraid to just search what you need, like and search smartly. So write the language that you want to use, so JavaScript, and then just a few keywords, like, I don't know, when I was searching how to replace things, so string replace, and then it would like find it immediately, right? So this is a way how you can quickly and simply add things. How did I start my career? So back when I was 15, I started to code for one of the local Latvian game servers. For a game, I started to write little scripts. It wasn't even JavaScript, it was something else. And I didn't have any resources, so I just was trying to create like new armor and new weapons and etc. And basically just slowly trying to do little things. And over time, you had a lot of examples. So you have like, here's how a weapon should be written. So you take that piece of code, copy paste it, and then start changing things in it. And once you change something, then you kind of relaunch everything and look, okay, if I change that, then this happens. If I change this, then that happens. And you kind of slowly keep changing things over time and then kind of trying to understand how things work. But this was like, I'm what, 32 now? So 17 years ago. I did a lot of different coding, a lot of time. But I think the key part is don't be afraid. I can actually show you another cool thing where you can play around if you want to. And it's called Elevator Saga. So you know how when you click on the elevator a button and then it does? So this is JavaScript. And you have to write the code for an elevator. And if I click start, then people show up and then the elevator moves. So this is basically what happens. There are two functions. The first one is basically how to start, like it creates all the elevators. This is what happens every loop. So currently these people here want to go to floor 2, but it never goes to floor 2. So now everyone's waiting and nothing happens, right? So if we would just do this. And I think save, apply, and now it will go in circles, right? And there are, this is kind of game which has, I think, up to 20 levels. So at the end, there is much, much harder. I think there's around 19 different stages. So this is the end boss. You have a lot of elevators and a lot of code to write. So this is a way how you can try something which is much more responsive and where you can quickly see what you're writing rather than just having these kind of weird blocks falling. So this is another way, another doorway for you how to start. I hope I answered your question.